With Augustus, we enter the period of empire in ancient Rome, and the nature of Roman society, certainly of politics, is going to change. The statue that we're looking at, figure 727 in our textbook, I am asking you to look at in some detail in a Smart History video. I'm just going to go over a couple of the highlights of it right now as an introduction also to Augustus. Augustus is going to rule for over 40 years, so he's going to help to mold Rome, to shape its politics, its culture, and particularly for us, its art and the way in which an emperor uses art, especially architecture, but also sculpture, to help to support his own rule. Augustus is going to usher in what is referred to as the Pax Romana, and I have that right down here. The Pax Romana lasts approximately 200 years and means the Roman peace. So Augustus, however politically motivated he may have been in some of the things he did, including the way he directed art and architecture, he nevertheless did a pretty good job as being emperor because he laid a foundation in Rome for peace and prosperity that is going to last for a very long time. You can see in this statue, which is larger than life size, that Augustus is turning away from the use of verism. And that in part is going to be from the influence that Greek art is going to play on Roman art, particularly in the reign of Augustus, who was very, very fond of the ancient Greek society, culture, and also its art. And in our Smart History video, you will see, in fact, that the Roman carver of the statue of Augustus is turning back to 5th century BCE classical Greek prototypes, but at the same time creating a very commanding and ideal Roman ruler, and an image that conveys strength, ability to rule as a military man, also as a divine figure, and as a commanding figure because his arm comes into our space. All of this creating an image of our emperor that would make us want to support our emperor. Brace yourself for the next picture. I do want you to know that the statue of Augustus would have been painted, and this is an approximation of what it would have looked like. Ancient Roman sculpture, like the sculpture before it, was richly colored, and often as we look at these images today, we kind of go, ooh, this is just a little bit too much. It's too gaudy for our tastes. But to the Roman eyes, this would not only have looked right, but it also would have helped them to pick out the details, particularly on the breastplate of Augustus. Okay, and another example, from a distance, this would not have been as glaring either, but it would have still allowed you to pick out the storyline that Augustus intended originally for you to see. This is a set of slides that references the Pax Romana under Augustus and the building projects that occur under Augustus. As a good Roman citizen, you would have to pay your taxes, you might have to serve in the military, but you would have to make your contribution. In return, you would expect that your government provided for you. And pretty much as we have today, that means a good road system, it means running water, it means sanitation, it means a standing military, it means making your cities work. It also means providing things like bridges as needed, and we'll look at one in a second, or public baths as required. All of these contributions, at least under the reign of Augustus and later, are going to be reminders of what it is that the government does provide for you. So, how does the Roman Empire do this? They create a form of architecture that is based on a single symbolic element, and that symbolic element becomes essentially the brand of Rome. And the symbolic element is the Roman arch. Over on our right, we see, this is the Arch of Constantine from the 4th century. We see a large arch surrounded by two smaller Roman arches. Okay, Roman arches are characterized by a rounded shape. And what we're looking at here is a triumphal arch. This is a 4th century example. I'm going to show you a couple other examples in just a minute. The point I want to make is the rounded arch, the Roman arch, is everywhere. It's everywhere that the Roman army went and conquered territory that became a part of the Roman world. In other words, it's the signature of the Roman Empire. And consequently, the architecture displaying the Roman arch indicates the power and the presence of Rome. The Arch of Constantine, which is 4th century, is located in the city of Rome, along with a couple other triumphal arches as well. These arches were used for a couple things. One was to commemorate victories, particularly of emperors or great generals in the battlefield, but they also were used to direct you, particularly as you entered a main thoroughfare of the city. As you take a look at the left, it is a reconstruction of what the city of Rome looked like in the 1st century. And I would like you to know it is cosmopolitan. It was very dense. It had the requirements and it had the advantages and the disadvantages, the problems that are associated with our own modern cities. You can, in my overview, see the Colosseum located right here, and you do have a Smart History video on that. When you look at the Colosseum, remember that it is created with 3 levels of triumphal arches. In other words, rounded Roman arches. There are 80 on each level, repeated one after the other, after the other, after the other. This is the symbol of Rome, and the presence of the arch often indicates not just Roman construction, but also something that your government is doing for you. The Arch of Constantine, the one on our right, is located in Rome, but it doesn't matter where you go throughout the Roman world. You can even today find reminders of the presence of Rome. I've got 2 samples for you right here. The one that is on our right is 743. You have an aerial in our textbook. It's the city of Timgad. It's located in North Africa. And guess what? It has a triumphal arch located right here. The triumphal arch in this case follows the same pattern, and that is a threesome, essentially, of arches, 2 small ones with a larger one in the center. This was used to mark the main drag for the city that was planned as basically a retirement community for Trajan's soldiers. In the textbook, you can see the gridded format for it and the rigorous planning that went into constructing it. But North Africa, part of the Roman Empire, same architectural form, and a reminder of the power and presence of Rome. The work that is on our left is another arch, and again we're following the same formula. These arches do occur with single arch openings as well as with double arch openings, but probably the most famous form is what we're looking at, and that is with triple arch openings. This one is located in Orange in the southern part of France, and it is worth looking at not just because it continues the same formula, but also because it's easy to see scale. At least I hope it's easy. This is another one of my famous or infamous scale shots, and that little figure down there is me. I'm 5 feet tall, just a reminder. This is huge. This is monumental. One of the elements of style of Roman architecture in general is scale. It tends to be very large, it's very sturdy, it's intended to be imposing. The Romans didn't build it this way so that it would last forever, the way the Egyptians built the Great Pyramid. The Romans built it this way so that it would be grand, so that it would intimidate, so that it would refer to you the splendors and the power of Rome. The Romans were the first folks to come along who developed a methodical system of supplying water to their people. That is the real subject for 733. It's Pont du Gard, but it's an aqueduct bridge where water is carried to the city of Nîmes. At the same time, in southern France, at the same time, the Romans also were able to provide a road so that they could connect various parts of their empire. Okay, the roadbed is located right here on this level. The water channel is at the very top of this construction. The purpose of this was to provide a public service, to provide water to the people who lived in this newly conquered, relatively newly conquered Roman portion of the empire. And it was pretty successful. The Romans also did it in a very, very Roman way, using good engineering and practicality. There was a spring 31 miles away from the city of Nîmes. The spring was on higher ground than the city. So what the Romans did simply was to take a pipe, carry the water from the spring downward, gently tapering, using gravity flow to the city, from the higher point to the lower point. You don't have to do anything. You can let the water do the work for you. The water flows and is covered. The channel up above is covered so that the water is totally protected. It doesn't evaporate. It also doesn't get dirty. This was a very easy thing to do until they got to the dip in the landscape, which went down here, which was essentially the river Gard. So in order to continue the flow of the water, gently declining toward the city of Nîmes, they had to put in the aqueduct bridge. And for that reason, the water line is actually up as high as it is. It's about, I think, 160 feet up in the air. It's pretty hefty distance to create this. The Romans did a superior job and were successful in bringing in 100 gallons of water per person per day for the city of Nîmes. So using logic and good engineering and the Roman arch, the Romans were able to provide for a city under their control and at the same time remind the people who received the water that it was in fact being brought to them by the Romans. The design is created with a repetition of Roman arches. The greatest distance across the span of the biggest one is 82 feet. So again, this is monumental, and I would like you to remember that. It was quarried out of local stone, so it is practically made because it was not actually inside the city, it was outside of it, and it did not need to be beautiful. The Romans simply left the stone uncovered so that they didn't stucco it, they didn't paint it, they didn't cover it with a finer material. It simply served its purpose well and reminded everybody in the area of the presence and ingenuity of the ancient Romans. Some of the stones project forward. You can see right here, and the purpose of these, as we understand it, was to be used to string ropes over them to help to haul materials up for purposes of construction, or maybe if anything needed to be repaired. But for the ancient Romans, everything fundamentally was as simple but as practical and efficient as possible. There is a rhythmic flow to the arches. The top level, the third level, the water level essentially, has much smaller arches, so the energy quickens as the arches are smaller and more rapidly repeated. But the entire monument is unified in terms of repeated shapes and forms. The slide on the left is again a scale shot. I want you to understand that the Romans built on a massive scale, and it was to suggest, I'm going to say, their presence, their dominance, their power, their authority, and by nature of creating monumental architecture, these images become representations of a very imposing culture. Okay, again, this is me, and I'm right on the inside of one of these pretty hefty arches, like right about there. You can also see I'm not standing too close to the edge, and the reason for that is it's really scary, because this is way up in the air. But it served the purpose for the Romans particularly well. The roadbed was on the other side, so they could get their military equipment, their trade through, so you could get carts and horses through, and you could at the same time bring water across the top.